My husband laughed loudly, patted his mistress on the shoulder. I'm proud of you. At her promotion party, he paused for a beat, glanced toward me. Unlike some people who walk into this family and only bring shame, if you were me in that moment, would you stay silent and endure? Or stand up and turn everything upside down? Write your answer in the comments. I sat at the very back row of the hotel's banquet hall, the third chair from the aisle, right under the air vent that hummed too loudly, and over a white tablecloth stained with a dried wine mark from some previous party. I shouldn't have been sitting here. At first, my name was placed at table number 4, closer to the stage, next to a few distant relatives of Richard, faces I couldn't even remember the names of. But I moved myself here an hour ago, right when the speeches started, right when I understood what kind of night this was going to be. Richard didn't even notice. He was standing in the lights, one hand resting on Ashley's shoulder, the young, dazzling mistress in a tight red dress, while I was nothing but the shadow of the legal wife sitting behind. 28 years old, Richard said, his voice carrying clearly through the speakers, the confidence of a man who had never had his ability questioned. And already the youngest project director in the company's history. He paused just long enough for the small gasps of admiration to spread through the room. Some people spend their whole lives just trying to touch the position that Ashley reached before 30. The applause rose again, thicker, longer. I still didn't clap. My hands were interlocked on my lap, my knuckles so tense they turned white. Ashley turned her head, flashing a carefully practiced smile toward the cameras. The kind of smile that was humble but fully aware of her own worth. I didn't need to hear clearly to know what she would say when she took the microphone. The usual lines about opportunity, effort, and being trusted that people always use at ceremonies like this. Her dress was definitely worth 10 times my monthly salary. The watch Richard had just given her sparkled under the lights, a diamond bezel Rolex Datejust limited edition, the same one I had complimented him on last week. We are expanding into Hawaii, Richard continued, sweeping his hand toward the LED screen behind him. A 3D rendering of a resort appeared. An infinity pool, a private beach, rows of white villas shimmering in the sunset. A $75 million resort project in Maui. 800 rooms, 3 restaurants, 1 spa, a tournament-standard golf course. The biggest deal Donovan Hospitality has ever done. He paused, took a sip of wine, letting the grandeur of the number sink into the air. And I am handing this entire project to Ashley, Richard went on, turning to look at his mistress with a gaze that anyone could see was not just a boss's gaze. The applause this time was even louder. Someone whistled. I lowered my head and looked at my fingers. Hands that once worked in a factory, just like Ashley always mocked whenever she saw me. She wasn't entirely wrong. I really did work there. Ashley will be moving to Maui next month, Richard said, sounding excited as if he were describing a well-earned reward for a loyal warrior. We've already prepared a penthouse on the top floor of the residential tower inside the resort. Soft laughter, a few teasing comments like, "Wow, what a view," came from the table in front. And since every project lead needs a worthy vehicle, the screen behind Richard changed. A glossy black Audi R8 appeared, perfectly angled against an orange-red sunset, every curve of the body shining almost provocatively. The keys are already waiting for you in Maui, Ashley, Richard said, his voice softening, more intimate, just enough for people to still pretend it was only a generous boss rewarding an outstanding employee. You deserve all of this. We are very proud of you. He hugged Ashley tightly, the kind of hug a man gives the woman who makes him feel young, powerful, and still valuable. Then he said, the exact sentence I had waited for all night. He didn't need to turn around to look at me, didn't need to glance toward the very back table hidden in the shadows, didn't need to say my name, but every word still stabbed straight through my heart. I'm proud of you, proud in a way that not everyone who walks into this family can achieve. Some people only bring shame. The whole room went silent for a heartbeat. Not completely silent. The air conditioner still hissed. Someone's phone vibrated softly, A server's shoes squeaked against the marble floor, but quiet enough for everyone to understand exactly what had just happened. My shoulders stiffened. I could feel it from this distance. How my back went rigid. How my hand froze halfway while reaching for the glass of water, not knowing whether to pick it up or let it go. I didn't look toward Richard, but I knew I had heard it, and I knew the whole room had heard it too. Ashley smiled, just a little wider than before, a tiny fraction of a millimeter that most people would never notice, but I was used to watching the very small changes in her face. This was the moment Ashley had been waiting for all night. Not the resort project, not the Audi, but the public confirmation that she was the success and I was the mistake. The woman who was worth something compared to the failed wife. In truth, she had called me worse before, mostly when she thought I couldn't hear, but sometimes she didn't even bother to lower her voice. Stupid, only fit to stand at a machine in a factory. That was her favorite line, and the next line always followed. That type would never understand this world. A clean, familiar 1-2 punch, as natural as breathing. She had said that at last year's Christmas dinner, loud enough for at least half the table to hear, when my husband's aunt asked what I did for work. She said it again at my birthday party in March, when one of Richard's friends commented that I seemed quiet. She doesn't talk much because there's nothing in her head to say. Factory work doesn't need complex thinking. At that moment, Richard had defended me. The kind of defense that felt more like an apology than protection. She's just tired, works a lot. She's not used to gatherings like this. Those words made me shrink faster than Ashley's insults ever did. The speeches kept going. Ashley took the microphone and said things that sounded very humble, very professional, very family-oriented, and were clearly written by someone who knew exactly how to make a person look perfect in front of a crowd. Those words sounded hollow coming from someone who had never had to fight for anything, never been denied an opportunity, never had to wonder if anyone would catch them if they fell. I stopped listening and started remembering the factory. 3 months on the night shift, assembling car parts. The kind of work that teaches you how much a body can endure when the mind goes numb. 10 hours of repeating the same movement. The smell of machine oil and hot metal. The noise so loud your ears still buzzed when you got home. The kind of work Ashley thought was beneath human dignity. I was good at it. After 3 months, I was promoted to team leader on the line, found process gaps, saved the factory $40,000 in wasted materials, trained new workers, many of them later became shift supervisors. I used to be proud of that. Then I met Richard, the son of a factory director. One afternoon, with sunlight cutting through the industrial glass windows at exactly 4 o'clock, we were together for 8 months before I met the family that would become my in-laws. At the time, I didn't understand why he kept avoiding the topic of introducing me. I thought he was just being careful, just wanting things to move slowly. Now that I think about it, maybe he was delaying an inevitable moment of disappointment. Christopher, my father-in-law, looked at me the way people look at a stain on an expensive sofa, a problem to be dealt with, a flaw to be controlled. My mother-in-law was polite in the cold way that rich people are very good at performing. Every gesture correct, but behind it, complete indifference. Ashley, back then still called my best friend in front of everyone, was worse. Instant contempt. The kind of judgment that comes from someone who has never had to ask herself whether she might be wrong. And when we got married 2 years later, a wedding that cost more than my yearly salary, a guest list to which I contributed exactly 7 names, I thought maybe I had proven something. Maybe I had shown them I deserved to stand next to my husband, despite my background, despite what they called class. I was wrong. For 4 years, I tried my hardest, cooking when my mother-in-law was sick, trying to meet every harsh demand from his family. The first 2 years we were very happy, at least in my mind, but I don't know when they became this distant, when family became just a hollow shell that I kept trying to hold together. The speeches ended. The food was served. A kind of beef covered in a sauce whose name I couldn't even read. Vegetables arranged in shapes too perfect to eat. Dessert that looked like display pieces. I pushed the food around my plate and watched Richard laugh with someone, watched Ashley smiling near the stage. Richard said something, and Ashley leaned closer to him, laughing softly, very close. They looked like a perfect pair. I looked down at my watch. 9:47. The party could last until 11, maybe longer. I could leave early, make an excuse about a headache or work in the morning. But Richard wouldn't get angry. He had never been angry with me, only disappointed. The kind of disappointment that makes someone feel small for not being strong enough to endure one more night for his family. So I stayed. Drank too much red wine that the staff kept refilling. Watched Ashley accept congratulations from a line of people that never seemed to end. Relatives, partners, friends, all of them speaking the same language of success that they thought I would never belong to. I left the party without saying goodbye to anyone. Richard and Ashley were still dancing the last song under the stage lights. I quietly walked past the reception desk, called a taxi, and disappeared into the freezing October night. When I got home, I didn't make a scene, didn't smash anything, didn't cry in the living room like in the movies Ashley probably loves. I just quietly hung my party dress on the hanger, stood still looking at it for a long time under the yellow light, and then started packing a suitcase. I put in exactly the bare minimum: a few comfortable clothes, underwear, my laptop, a small photo frame of me and my mother when I was little, my father's old notebook, a box of headache medicine. I pulled the suitcase to the door, stopped in front of the shoe rack, looked at the high heels I wore tonight, the pair that made my feet burn, but I still forced a smile all evening, and didn't take them, just slipped on my old sneakers with worn-down heels. Maya opened the door at almost 11 p.m. Her apartment was on the 27th floor, all glass, looking down at a city sparkling like a fake sea of stars. Maya was wearing an old Harvard Law hoodie, her hair tied up, no makeup. She looked at me for only a second, then opened her arms. I burst into tears right there in the hallway like an abandoned child. The living room had only one amber table lamp turned on. Maya placed a cup of hot tea in front of me and a thick dark blue folder. I was still shaking, my lips pale from the cold and the shock. Maya sat down across from me, her voice very soft but sharp like a knife. "Eleanor, look at me." "What did Richard do tonight?" I told her. Every single word. The line, "I'm proud of you," the hug, the glance in my direction when he said, "Some people only bring shame." I told it until there were no more tears left, only a block of ice in my chest. Maya didn't interrupt me. She just set her coffee cup down, took a pen, and scribbled notes on a sticky paper, sometimes asking a short question. That was exactly what he said? Did anyone hear it clearly? How many people were in the room? When I finished, the room stayed silent for a while. The wall clock ticked step by step, the sound of cars outside mixed with the cold hum of the air conditioner. Maya sighed, but not the kind of sigh that came from pity. It was the breath of someone who had just confirmed what she had long suspected. "All right," she said, standing up. "I think it's time to show you this." She went into her study, leaving me on the sofa with my coat still half on. After a while, Maya came back, holding a thick, pale yellow folder, the kind of hardcover you see in courtroom movies. She placed it on the table, pulled out an old A4 sheet of paper, the edges yellowed. My blue ink signature from before the wedding. Power of attorney, full authorization. Maya placed her hand on top of mine, cold but very firm. "You are not a poor wife who walked into a rich family, Eleanor. You are the one who paid for them to build that entire empire, while they sneered and called you a stupid girl, only fit to be a factory worker." I sat still on Maya's sofa, my hands wrapped around a cup of tea that had gone cold a long time ago. I started to remember. Not the vague kind of remembering, but memories sharp like knives cutting into skin. I was 19 years old, standing in the conference room on the 42nd floor of my father's company. Chief Legal Officer Marcus Vincent placed a stack of documents as thick as a wrist in front of me. "Your father left the entire company to you, Eleanor. You are the sole shareholder. I had always known I had a rich father, But he left when I had just been born, and I knew I grew up in my mother's love and her hatred toward the husband who abandoned her. I cut him off. Do I need to do anything right now? Marcus gave a sad smile. Your father said, when you are ready, then come back. If not, the board will continue to run everything for you. You just need to live, Eleanor. Live properly. I didn't want to go back. I was afraid my mother would be hurt, afraid of the pitying looks from employees, afraid I would just be an orphaned girl put on a throne by paperwork. So I did the only thing I thought was right, based on what my mother said before she died. She forgave him. You must understand the factory from the concrete floor all the way to the roof, from the last worker to the director. If you don't understand, never sit in that chair. I put away my management degree and applied for a job at the biggest factory in Michigan. Third shift, assembly line for components. 10 hours a day, hands full of cuts, back hurting so badly I had to sit on cardboard boxes to rest. After 3 months, I was already a line team leader. I found a process flaw that was wasting $42,000 a month and fixed it in one night. I was insanely proud. That was the first time I felt I deserved my mother's trust. Then I met my husband. I sat across from him in the break room, wearing a dirty safety suit, hands still stained with oil. He asked, "Do you feel this job is something to be proud of?" I laughed, for the first time since my mother died. Of course, I'm doing the right thing to change my life. He looked at me longer than usual. Then we started dating. When he brought me home to meet his family, Richard held my hand tightly at the door of his parents' house, whispered, "Don't worry, they'll like you." But Christopher looked at me like he was looking at a scratch on a new car. My mother-in-law smiled in a deadly polite way. Ashley, who at that time was still Richard's close friend, sneered from the first second. A factory worker, huh? Interesting. I ignored it all. Because I loved Richard, and I believed he loved who I was, I put the cup of tea down on the table, Maya still silently looking at me. I whispered, this time not shaking anymore. My mother was right. I learned from the concrete floor all the way to the roof. Now I'm ready to sit in that chair. Maya pointed to the bold line. This is the power of attorney you signed for me to manage your assets 4 years ago, exactly 2 months before your wedding. It allows me, as your legal representative, to decide and supervise all investment activities under the accounts in your name. But, she tapped her finger lightly on another section. They can only be done for your benefit, cannot be transferred, gifted, or used as collateral for anyone if you don't confirm. I looked at the numbers on the page. Too many. My throat went dry. Why didn't I know about these accounts? Maya didn't blink, looked straight at me. I tried. Do you remember when I asked you if you wanted to sit down and go through your finances right after your wedding? I remembered. I remembered that afternoon clearly. I was sitting in a coffee shop, my hands still stained with ink from the factory. Maya opened her laptop, talked about portfolio, shares, assets your mother left. And I laughed, waved it off. Forget it. I'm busy adjusting to my in-laws now. You manage it for me. Every time I brought it up, you said you didn't want to think about money, that Richard and his family would take care of it, that you just needed to enjoy being with him. Maya paused for a moment, her voice slowing down. But every time we invested, we talked about it. I remembered, even though I wasn't working, I always studied the market, and Maya was the only friend I could confide in. We talked a lot. She always listened to me. Now it's time you know who you really are and what you really have. She flipped to the next page. It was a statement. Long numbers, names of investment funds, stock codes, a few lines describing real estate. I didn't understand everything, but I understood the last line, where 2 numbers were underlined. Estimated total value, 11.8 million USD. The world in my head seemed to slip. A little. The room seemed to shrink. You, Maya said firmly, are the one holding an asset portfolio close to $12 million, not including your shares in your father's company. You are just the last person in this story to realize it. She touched the second page lightly. For the past 4 years, I've used this power of attorney to do exactly one thing: protect you and your money. Maya stood up, walked to her desk, opened her laptop. She typed a few commands, and the screen showed numbers, blue-gray charts. The original amount in the account your mother transferred for me to manage for you was 7 figures, just as an example. Now it's close to 12 million, she said, turning the screen toward me. I allocated it into funds, stocks, and part real estate. Everything is in your name. Richard isn't listed on anything. He only appears in one category: capital applicant. I leaned closer, my fingers unconsciously digging into the edge of the sofa. Maya dragged the mouse, opened a folder named Donovan Hospitality. Inside were dozens of files: Hawaii Resort, loan agreement, email, Richard 1, 2, 3. Here! Maya opened a presentation. The Donovan Hospitality logo appeared first, then the 3D resort image I had seen on the LED screen tonight. The same beach, the same infinity pool, the same orange sunset tone. 2 years ago, Richard sent me this proposal. She scrolled through the next slides. Projected numbers, colorful growth charts, words like high ROI, low risk. Back then, on paper, this project didn't look bad. Maya let out a breath. The land was secured, permits were acceptable, banks agreed to lend if a strong enough investor stood behind it. I decided to use a part of your assets, just a part, as a test investment, because— She looked up at me, not avoiding my eyes. Because I didn't know how he treated you at home. I only saw a businessman looking for capital, with a wife who was the heir to a large fund, and I thought that if the profit was good, you would later have more of a voice in your husband's company. I was wrong about that part. I calculated the financial side, but I didn't calculate the human being. Maya switched to another file. An Excel sheet opened, dense with numbers. The Hawaii resort is collapsing, Maya said, this time not trying to keep her voice neutral anymore. Construction is delayed, costs are exploding, contractors are demanding payment, and the banks are starting to lose patience. Richard has used this project to show off to the whole world, to you, to his mistress, to his family, but on paper, it's a hole. She opened the email inbox, quickly searched a thread, clicked it open. This is the email he sent me 2 weeks ago. Maya read out loud, every word. Maya, we need to consider increasing the investment capital. If we don't have at least 40 million more within the next 1 or 2 months, the bank will freeze the credit line. I don't want to put pressure on you, but I hope you will help. She closed the email, looked back at me. Eleanor, listen carefully. Without more money from you, Donovan Hospitality, the entire hotel system, not just Hawaii, will not survive another 60 days. They owe contractors, they owe banks, they owe other small investors. This system is being held up only by your inheritance money. I heard a sound inside my head, not the sound of collapse, but the sound of a door being thrown open very hard. Images from the past few months suddenly connected. The times Richard came home late, the smell of alcohol and unfamiliar perfume, the casual comments about pressure from the bank, difficult market. Maya leaned back in her chair, folded her arms, and looked at me for a long time. Without you, without this investment fund, Richard is about to go bankrupt. He'll lose the resort. The whole Donovan hospitality system he was so proud of that he humiliated you in front of everyone tonight is standing on your money. I clenched my hands together, my nails digging into my skin without feeling pain. In other words, Maya said, lowering her voice, each word dropping between us like a heavy stone, you are holding the leverage, a leverage big enough to lift your husband's entire family up and then decide where to put them down. The question is no longer, are you strong enough, but do you want to use it or not? Maya looked straight into my eyes, her voice slowing. You also hold the right to decide whether this marriage should be kept or not him. I cried. I held her and cried. I grew up in the lack of my father's love, in my mother's loneliness. I could put away my management degree to learn from the bottom, as my mother taught me. But when I met Richard, when I enjoyed love with him. I lost my way. I wanted to stay with him. I wanted to keep him. I wanted to walk into his family, trying to hold on to a family that never welcomed me. The next afternoon, I came home earlier than usual. The apartment door clicked shut behind me with a dry click. And in that moment, I felt like I had just stepped out of a role I had been playing for far too long. I opened the filing cabinet, still sitting in the small study next to the bedroom, pulled out drawer after drawer, flipped through each stack of papers that I had quietly kept for the past 3 years. Bank statements, transfer records into the joint account. The numbers that never lie lay there, cold, orderly, telling a story that no one in my husband's family had ever bothered to read even once. I laid everything out across the table, each stack in chronological order. My phone vibrated. A message from Richard. "Are you home yet? Can we talk?" Maybe cancel the birthday. No need to make it big. I looked at the screen, the corner of my mouth lifting in the faintest curve. The birthday dinner he wanted to cancel. I had booked it 4 months ago at Gary Danko, the Michelin restaurant Ashley loved to brag about. I reserved a private corner table, white roses, a 12-course tasting menu, just 2 people. I was going to surprise him. I wanted one dinner to mend things after 4 years of marriage. Now the plan stayed the same. Only the number of guests changed. I called the restaurant directly. "Hello, I'm Eleanor. I have a reservation this Saturday. I want to change it from 2 guests to 12 guests, a private room with a screen and projector, completely discreet. Don't let anyone know the guest list in advance." The manager confirmed cheerfully. I heard the sound of typing, a light laugh. "All right, Eleanor, we will prepare the VVIP room, private entrance, closed curtains." The last text from Richard. "You're really mad at me, aren't you?" "Cancel the dinner. Let's just talk privately." I replied with only one single line. "Saturday, 8 p.m., Gary Danko. Be on time." I turned off the phone, placed it on the table next to the neatly organized files. Everything was ready. Now all that was left was to wait for the truth to step into the light. For 3 consecutive days, my phone kept vibrating nonstop. The first day was anger. "You've gone too far, Eleanor. I was just telling the truth." "What's with this silence? Do you think you're still some little kid?" The second day shifted to confusion. "What are you doing? Just answer me one thing." "You're talking to a lawyer, aren't you? I know you've been seeing Maya." On the third day, the anger turned into something softer, more cracked. His tone changed through each message. "I don't understand what's happening. I'm sorry if I did something wrong. Can we talk? Just once." Then, "You're worrying me." And finally, "I don't want to lose you." I read them all, didn't reply. Not because I didn't know what to say, but because for the first time in 4 years, my silence wasn't weakness. It was a choice. On the morning of the third day, I went to Helen Voss's office, the divorce lawyer Maya had recommended. The building sat in the middle of the financial district, gray concrete, glass reflecting the dull winter sky. The elevator went up to the 17th floor, the space closing in, the faint scent of the previous person's perfume still clinging to the metal handrail. When the doors opened, I stepped into a hallway that was frighteningly quiet, the carpet thick enough to swallow the sound of footsteps. The name, Helen Voss, Family Law, was etched in thin metal on frosted glass. She didn't stand when I walked in. She just lifted her head from a file, looked straight at me, eyes sharp and clear, in a way that made me feel I had stepped into a room with no place for self-pity. "Sit," Helen said, her voice low and even. I placed the folder bag on the table. Copies of contracts, bank statements, property papers, company formation documents, things I had arranged as neatly as if preparing for the most important exam of my life. She flipped through each page, unhurried, her fingernail tapping lightly on the paper whenever she paused to read carefully. "This apartment," Helen said, pointing to the ownership document, "left to you by your parents before the marriage. Your name only. No agreement to merge assets. Legally, this is your separate property." I nodded. My palms went cold. She flipped to the next section. "This company was founded with inheritance money." Before the marriage, Richard's name does not appear in any shareholder records. No capital from his side. This is a very important foundation. She looked up at me for the first time. There is a very strong basis to keep it separate. She turned to a stack of statements. These expenditures during the marriage, mortgage payments, car purchases, equipment, living expenses, regular transfers into the joint account. This is the key point. She lined each sheet up straight, as if placing pieces on a chessboard. These show that you were the main contributor, not just emotionally, but financially. This can be used to counter any claim he makes to divide the assets. I sat still, hearing the soft hum of the air conditioner in the room. Suddenly, everything became very quiet again, like that night when I sat at the last table at that party, when the whole room went silent because of one deliberate sentence. Helen closed the folder. "If you file for divorce," she said, not avoiding it, "this will not be a peaceful battle. A man like your husband will not accept retreating quietly. He will smear you, apply pressure, even pull outsiders in. You must prepare yourself." I looked at the glass behind her and saw my own reflection. Pale face, dark circles under my eyes, but eyes that were different now, no longer drifting. 4 years, I said. My voice was hoarse but very clear. 4 years of being treated like I was invisible is enough. Helen looked at me once more. This time, no more scrutiny. Only recognition. "Good," she said. "I'll have the full paperwork ready by early next week." I stood up, took back the folder. Before I stepped out of the door, Helen added one more sentence, her voice very light. "He will beg, he will cry, he will promise to change. Don't believe it. They're only afraid of losing money and losing face." I nodded. I knew. I had believed him for 4 years. Now, never again. That afternoon, I met Blake Harrington at a small coffee shop in the Mission District. He was already seated in the corner, wearing a light blue shirt, laptop open, 2 cups of espresso still hot. Blake was the one who turned tech scandals into inspiring stories. The expert who made the whole world say his clients' names the way he wanted. "So you finally stepped into the light." He smiled when I sat down. I told him everything, the marriage coming to an end, the fact that the board of my father's company had agreed to transfer full control to me within the next week, and the birthday dinner at Gary Danko on Saturday night. Blake listened without interrupting, only nodding slightly a few times, his eyes shifting from surprise to something close to admiration. "We have to do this carefully," he said when I finished. "The press release must not smell like revenge on a husband. The story has to be: 2 women quietly built an industrial empire worth hundreds of millions while the world looked the other way. The simple life of an heir, not family drama." I nodded. "I don't want revenge. I just don't want to hide anymore." Blake turned the laptop toward me, showing a draft press release. "Hartley Dynamics officially recognizes Ms. Eleanor Hartley as chairwoman and chief executive officer, the sole heir of a multi-million-dollar industrial empire." When does it go live? Saturday night, exactly 11 p.m., right after Richard's birthday dinner. While they're still in shock from what you say at the restaurant, the release will hit all major outlets at once. By Sunday morning, the whole world will know who you are. He tapped lightly on the table. Saturday night, you have your private moment with them behind closed doors. After that, you step out of the shadows. Fair. I smiled, for the first time in many days, feeling truly light. "I'm ready." We finalized the last schedule. The board meeting and official handover ceremony would take place on Friday, exactly 1 day before Richard's birthday. The press release was sent in advance to major newsrooms, embargoed until 11 p.m. Saturday. On the morning of Richard's birthday, Saturday, I woke up at 5 a.m. to an email from Marcus Vincent, Chief Legal Counsel of Hartley Dynamics. The subject line was only, "Completed." The body was only one line. "Full control of Hartley Dynamics has been transferred to Ms. Eleanor Hartley, effective immediately. Congratulations, Chairwoman." Attached were the handover minutes, and a quick screenshot of the trust fund account. A lot of zeros, not including the value of company shares. I sat on the bed, opened my personal banking app. The number appeared, clear, unmistakable. I waited for excitement, a scream, a tear of victory, but there was nothing, only a deep stillness, as if for 4 years I had lived in a room with no windows, and this morning someone had thrown the door wide open and let the light pour in. Money didn't matter anymore. I put the phone down, stood up, pulled the curtain. The city blazed bright beneath my feet. I got out of bed, walked straight to the wardrobe, and pulled out the deep blue silk dress I had bought yesterday, saved only for tonight. The cut was simple, the fabric expensive, not flashy, exactly the kind that makes people have to come closer to recognize its value. I showered, did my makeup, curled my hair carefully. When I looked at myself in the mirror, I almost didn't recognize the woman staring back. Not because I looked different, but because the feeling inside had changed. Awake, present, no longer disappearing from my own life. I arrived at Gary Danko at 7:45 p.m., handed my car over at the lot across the street, and walked 2 blocks. The October wind carried salt and fog from the bay across my coat. My heels clicked steadily on the sidewalk like a countdown. Outside the restaurant, there was only a small brass plaque on the dark oak door. A place that didn't need to show off, because the people who deserved to be there already knew the way. 4 months ago, I reserved this table for 2 people, imagining candles, white roses, and champagne glasses. Now it was still white roses, but the table was longer. The staff was already waiting at the door. Black dress. "Ma'am, everything is ready as requested." I nodded thanks, followed her down the marble hallway, past black and white Paris market photos, and into the private room at the end. A long table for exactly 12 people. Champagne glasses already arranged, sparkling under warm Edison lights. The menu I chose in advance. 7 chef's courses, wine pairing for each. In the corner, the large projector screen had been lowered, the projector already connected to Wi-Fi. I opened my laptop and tested it once. I scrolled quickly through the next slides. Transfer charts, a list of every dollar Maya pumped into Donovan Hospitality for me, all clean, professional, impossible to deny. "Perfect," I said, closing the laptop. "When I give the signal, have the champagne poured and dim the lights." The staff member smiled in understanding, led me out to the main bar, and seated me in a hidden corner where I could clearly see the entrance and the hallway leading to the private room. A glass of mineral water with lemon was placed in front of me. "To keep your head clear," she whispered. I nodded in thanks. 7:53 p.m., Christopher and his wife, my in-laws, walked in first. He wore an expensive gray suit. She wore pearls, their faces slightly confused when they didn't see their son waiting at the door. Devon and Harper came next, Richard's business partners, shiny suits, sparkling watches. They looked around, frowned, clearly not understanding why they were here. Emily, the staff member, smiled professionally and led the guests into the private room. 7:57 p.m. Ashley appeared. A tight red dress, hair in a high bun, lipstick the color of blood. She walked in as if the whole world should turn to look. I saw Christopher hug her, my mother-in-law kiss her cheek, Devon whistle teasingly. Ashley laughed brightly, the smile of someone who thought tonight she was the center. Marcus arrived last, making everyone slightly confused because no one had ever met him. They were all there, gathered inside the glass room, laughing, clinking glasses, still thinking this was another promotion celebration for Ashley or a surprise birthday for Richard. I sat at the bar, quietly watching, my hand slowly turning the glass of water. 8:07 p.m., Richard finally appeared. He froze in the doorway, eyes scanning the room, then stiffened when he saw his entire family and friends inside the private room. His eyes searched for me. I stayed still, didn't smile, didn't wave. He walked quickly toward me, his face shifting from confusion to real worry when he saw my expression. "Eleanor, what's going on? Why are my parents, Ashley, everyone here?" I stood up, adjusted my dress, my voice light, but every word clear. This is your birthday dinner. I invited the people you value the most. He stammered. I thought, just the two of us. No, I cut him off, smiling for the first time that night. Tonight, we're going to talk in front of everyone who helped you realize I'm just a factory worker. I turned and walked toward the private room. Behind me, Richard's footsteps sounded slow, his breathing already starting to tangle. He was starting to understand that the story he thought he had written no longer existed, and the real play was only just beginning. Emily opened the door to the private dining room. The laughter inside cut off instantly. 11 pairs of eyes turned toward me. Ashley stiffened, her champagne glass frozen mid-air. Christopher frowned. Richard stood behind me, his voice already hoarse. Eleanor, what is this really? I walked to the head of the table, my voice steady, clear like I was running a board meeting. 2 weeks ago, my husband's mistress said in front of me that I was a stupid person only fit to be a factory worker, that he deserved someone better. I paused, looked around the room. Tonight, I invited everyone who agreed with her words to come here, to see with their own eyes how impressive I really am. I gave a small nod. Emily poured champagne for me and Richard. Richard dropped into the chair like a man without a soul. Silence fell, only the soft fizz of champagne bubbles remained. I pressed the remote. The screen lit up. The first slide appeared. Hartley Dynamics. My company's logo appeared clearly, sharp. Under it, lines of text moved with each click of my mouse. Annual revenue, growth, major contracts, corporate crisis projects. The number appeared. Millions of dollars. The breathing in the room shifted. The next slide. A $21 million acquisition deal. My personal capital contribution, $11.8 million. I didn't look at them. I just spoke. This is my company. I built it with legal inheritance money, years of silent work, and money that none of you here ever bothered to see. The next slide appeared. Bank statements, rows of transfers. My account arrow joint marital account. 4 straight years of marriage. Not a single amount held back. I flipped through each slide, slowly, deliberately. This is the money I paid to live with him, to keep this thing you call family functioning. The next slide, a larger transfer table. The Hartley Dynamics logo appeared. Total, more than $40 million, I said, and for the first time looked straight at my father-in-law. From Hartley Dynamics, the company temporarily managed by the board until I came of age, flowing into Donovan Hospitality's projects. The list appeared. Maui, Hawaii. I will demand full repayment with interest. No one spoke. And then Marcus, my lawyer, stood up, his voice low but filling the room. For anyone who is unclear, Mrs. Eleanor Hartley is the sole owner of Hartley Dynamics, the person all of you have called a factory worker for 4 years, even though she acted as your financial director without recognition. The air shattered into very small pieces. Richard looked at me as if I had turned into a completely different person in front of him. Ashley went numb. The smile on her lips froze, panic in her eyes. She had just realized the person she had humiliated for years was the one keeping oxygen flowing through the entire system she was benefiting from. I turned off the screen. Now for my terms. I took one slow step closer to the table, still holding the champagne glass. I will take supreme supervisory control of the Hawaii project. Richard and Ashley will report directly to me every week. Each word dropped like a hammer. I will file for divorce. Richard's lips moved. No sound. Assets will be divided strictly according to the law. I tilted my head. If you don't agree, I smiled. I will pull all capital. I will let this company go publicly bankrupt, and I will drag every lawsuit you're trying to hide under those pretty reports into the open. I raised the champagne glass, smiled one last time. This dinner, $600 per person, is the birthday gift and divorce party I'm giving you, Richard. I wish you luck in finding someone better, like you dreamed. I set the glass down, never took a sip, turned around, walked out of the room. The sound of the door closing behind me was soft. but enough to cut off 4 years of marriage and a room full of people who had never really looked at me. I did not look back. A CT-11. I drove home in an automatic state, my eyes on the road, but not really seeing anything. My hands held the steering wheel steady, my breathing even, strangely calm. Maya's apartment was still dark when I opened the door. I didn't turn on the lights, just walked straight to the large window and looked down at the city falling asleep. Office lights were turning off one by one, the last bars closing, the heartbeat of the city slowing down. The phone was silent, but the screen kept lighting up on the kitchen counter. Messages, calls, notifications. I didn't read them. I sat down on the sofa in the dark and waited. Waiting for pain, waiting for regret, waiting for something that was supposed to come after I had blown up 4 years of marriage in front of 11 pairs of eyes. But nothing came. Only a cold clarity. I had done the right thing. The next morning, when I turned my phone on again, it vibrated nonstop like it wanted to fly out of my hand. Inbox, messages, notifications. Everything was flooded with red. Headlines lined up one after another. Secret CEO exposes husband at luxury birthday dinner. Stupid factory worker, actually the one who kept Donovan Hospitality alive. Online, people split into two camps. Half praised me as a new symbol of feminism, the woman who stopped being silent and pointed straight at where she was being crushed. The other half called me cruel, using inheritance money to humiliate others, weaponizing a luxury dinner. Everyone had their own angle. Everyone had their own story they wanted to tell using my life. Maya brought bagels and coffee, hugged me tightly right at the doorway. "You did it," she said, her eyes bright. "You're not invisible anymore." We sat on the sofa, eating and making lists, which interviews to accept, which messages to keep, how to turn this storm into an advantage for Hartley Dynamics. I opened my personal inbox. 12 emails from Richard overnight. 11:47 p.m. You humiliated me in front of the world. 12:58 a.m. Why did you hide this from me? 3:03 a.m. About Ashley, I can explain. 3:33 a.m. I'm sorry, not because I got exposed, because I never really saw you. I read them all, then deleted everything, didn't reply. The phone rang again. Helen. "Good afternoon," she said, her voice still calm, like the first time we met, but this time with a layer of warning underneath. "Hope you managed to sleep a bit more this morning after last night's event." "A little," I answered. "Is something wrong?" "Your in-laws have hired a lawyer," Helen said directly. "A pretty famous one. Specializes in ugly, high-profile divorces. Very expensive, very aggressive. He called me an hour ago asking about your side's legal direction." I felt my stomach tighten, but my voice stayed even. "Fast." "People like him are always fast," Helen said. "That's why people pay him. I told him you're ready to file. But prepare yourself. Their side will definitely try to build a different media narrative. The story of a wife who deceived her husband, hid assets, and dumped him now that she's rich is very clickable." She paused. "They might try to pull the press in, use public pressure to force you to give up more money." I gave a small laugh. "If they want to play dirty, let them. I have enough clean evidence." I hung up and stood in front of the window. The city was awake, and for the first time in a very long time, so was I. A CT-12. 8 weeks later, I stood on the 43rd floor of the new tower, floor-to-ceiling glass flooded with morning sunlight spilling down onto San Francisco Bay, shimmering like silver scales. The walnut desk still smelled of fresh polish, and on it sat only a MacBook, a small cactus, and a brass nameplate engraved, "Hartley Dynamics, Eleanor Hartley, Chairman and CEO." 40 employees were laughing and talking outside, English, Japanese, Spanish voices mixing together. The phone vibrated on the desk, the screen lighting up with a new notification. The invisible wife or the cruel one? Some opinion piece. I opened it and scrolled through a few lines of comments of every kind. People calling me boss lady, people saying I was cruel, people analyzing that I weaponized pain with inheritance money, people writing long posts about feminism, people judging that I would never find real happiness. All of it mixed together, like a gray cloud of words drifting past too quickly. Don't read comments. Maya's voice came from behind me. She leaned her hip against the desk, holding a to-go coffee, her hair tied up in a rush, dark circles from late meetings the night before, but her eyes still clear and sharp as ever. You don't live in their heads. What matters is the company and the truth, not the feelings of strangers on the internet. I let out a breath, turned off the screen, rested my knee against the edge of the desk, and let out a soft laugh. I know, but sometimes I still get curious what role I'm playing in other people's stories. Maya shrugged. Let them call you whatever they want. Secret CEO, revenge wife, feminist icon, villain. You only need to know one role. The person who pays 40 people out there and lives honestly with her own life. That's enough. When Maya left the room to go into a meeting, I turned back to the desk and opened my laptop. In the inbox, there was a new email. Not from the press, not from partners. It was from Richard. Subject: This time, I really saw you. I sat down and opened it. He wrote long lines of text running together like water that had been held back too long, suddenly finding a crack. Outside, sunlight slid slowly from the glass onto the floor, the streak of light moving slowly like a clock with no ticking sound. I sat still, clearly feeling something I hadn't been able to fully feel 8 weeks ago. No tightness in my chest, no what if, no urge to reply to explain anything more. Only the absolute calm of someone who has already stepped through the door and locked it from this side. I moved the cursor to the top corner of the screen and pressed delete. Deleted from the inbox. Then went to blocked senders and added his email address. No anger, no joy. Just closing a communication line that no longer had any reason to exist. 3 months after the fateful dinner at Gary Danko, I lived alone in my own apartment. Still white walls, wooden floors, still the window looking down at the city, but no shadow of anyone moving back and forth, sighing, slamming doors, or throwing words that made the room colder than the weather outside. In the mornings, I could take an extra 10 minutes to sit on the floor, leaning my back against the sofa, holding a cup of hot coffee in my hands and watching sunlight crawl from the kitchen corner to the edge of the table, without being rushed, without having to try to be pleasant, so no one would be in a bad mood. At night, I ate sushi with Maya, laughing until my stomach hurt about company stories. Some days, I stood and spoke in front of 300 people at conferences, not shaking, not needing to look at notes. Some days, I just sat by the window, brewed a cup of tea, listened to old jazz, and let the cold wind blow into my face, so free that sometimes I forgot I had lived any other way. Sometimes I still remembered Ashley, remembered the line she said years ago, "Stupid, only fit to be a factory worker." That sentence, now that I think about it, was like a knife that accidentally cut the rope I had been tying around my own legs for 4 years. That cut hurt, but it was also the cut that freed me. Now, every morning when I wake up, I stand in the middle of the wide room, spread my arms, breathe in, and for the first time feel like the space fits my body exactly. Not too much, not too little. I'm not invisible anymore. I have become someone that, even when people close their eyes, they can still see. If you've listened to me until these final minutes, maybe somewhere in my story you saw a shadow of yourself, in silent dinners, in messages that were brushed aside, in times you tried to change, tried to endure to make someone else happy. If this reclaiming power journey touched a small corner of you, leave a sign, a like, a comment about the moment that stayed with you most, a subscribe so we can meet again in the next stories, about women who quietly stood up from the role of victims and returned to the place they deserve in their own lives.